Hey there guys, so this is part B of the video about auto snapshotting and replication of the data to another location. And in the first part we looked at the auto snapshotting and then replicated that data using the excellent ZFS replication to another dataset. But what happens if we want to do the same, but the destination which we want to replicate to, it isn't a ZFS dataset? Or what if we want to replicate our data to a remote server somewhere else? So this video follows on from the last, and we're going to look at both of those situations. Now I highly recommend, if you've not done so already, make sure you've watched the first video first, because that video goes far deeper into everything than this video does, even if you only want to know how to do the Rsync replication as opposed to the ZFS replication. Anyway, enough talk, let's jump onto a server and get this done. Okay, so here we are on one of my other servers. This one here has got two Z pools here, two ZFS Z pools. And inside this first Z pool here, we've got the app data. And obviously, the app data and all of its children, they're all data sets. So what I want to do is replicate this over onto this server here. And I want to place it on this disk here, which is an XFS formatted disk. And inside here, there's a share called test. And at the moment, there's nothing in that. So let's go back to the other server and just make sure we've got all of the plugins we need. Even though we're going to be replicating to another server using Rsync, I'm still going to want Sanoid because I want to auto snapshot the source dataset. And I want ZFS master. And obviously we're going to need user scripts because we're running a script. Okay, so there's one thing we do need to do is, because we're using a remote server, SSH keys have to be exchanged. Now if you want to see a really easy way to exchange SSH keys like I'm doing here, then see my video in the top right hand corner. With the SSH keys exchanged, let's go back to GitHub and copy the script again. And in user scripts here, I'm going to make a new script and I'm going to call it replication to remote server. And I'm going to paste the contents in here. Right, so let's fill out the variables here. So the notification here, I'm going to leave that all as is. I'm happy for those notifications. Now the source pool on this server, the source pool is called sublight and the data set is app data. Now snapshots, I want them, so I'm going to leave it as yes. My retention policy is good, so I'm going to leave that as is. But here, destination remote, as it's a remote server, I'm going to change this to yes. Now the remote user, because it's an Unraid server, well that's root. And the remote server IP here, this is actually already filled in, and that's the IP address of the server I'm replicating to. So under replication settings here, I'm not doing ZFS replication this time. I'm going to be using Rsync replication, so that needs to be set to Rsync. And because we're using Rsync replication, these ZFS replication variables, well, they don't need to be filled in. But here, I do need to fill in the location on the remote server, the parent location where we want to replicate to. Well, on that server, it's in the test share, but just to be sure it goes to that XFS disk, I'm going to put disk 3, its actual physical location. And for Rsync type, well, I want to have incremental backups. That will save a lot of space, because each time the incremental backup runs, it will use hard linking. So anything that's already copied in the past, it will just hard link that to the new copy. So the new copy only takes up the space of what changed from last time. Okay, so that's all done. We can click on to save changes here. And so with that done, I'm going to run the script in the background. When the snapshots are done, we should get a pop-up come here. Okay, so there's the snapshots done. And if I click onto the log here, we can see data being transferred across. So while that's happening, let's go across onto the destination server. I'm going to go to my disk 3 here and the test share. And we can see here, this is the folder that's being created. It's made out of the pool name sublight, then an underscore app data. And if we go inside, we can see here it's a dated folder for today's backup and the time it's being backed up. And inside of there, here are all the subfolders of the app data from the other server. Okay, so let's go back to the main server again now. Right, we can see the script's finished. And if I was to look at the notices here, we can see the snapshots were done and the replication was done. And going onto the main page and looking at the sublight data sets here, we can see that each one's got 3 snapshots. We've got our daily, weekly and monthly. Obviously there's no syncoid snapshot here because we were using Rsync. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to create another random data set in here. And I'm just going to call it test data set. And create that. And inside of that, I'll just make another folder. Okay, so there's a couple of changes. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the script again. Okay, so that's finished now. Let's go back to the other server. And now when we look in the test share, we can see there's 2 dated folders here with different times. So in the first one here, we don't have that test data set. But in the second one, we do. Okay, so before we wrap up this video, let's just have a look at hard linking and how using hard linking and incremental backups in Rsync saves a lot of disk space. Now, as you can see here, I've got another data set with 3 child data sets inside. This one here, 1, has got a 5.75 vdisk inside. This one here, 2, has got a 2.35 gigabyte vdisk. And this one, 3 here, is empty. So I've already run the script once and replicated this over onto this server here. And we can see the dated folder here, and inside here are our 3 directories. And let's see the space that this is all taking up. Using the file manager plugin, we can see the total space here is 8.10 gigabytes. Okay, so what I'm going to do now off screen is run the script again, but without adding anything new to the source. So with the script run, we can see we've now got 2 dated folders here with the same contents in each. And we can see in the new folder there's 8.10 gigabytes again. So with both of the backups present, let's see what the file manager makes of the size of the whole folder that contains both backups. And if we look here, it thinks it's 16.2 gigabytes. Well, is that correct or not? Well, spoiler alert, it isn't, because the files are hard linked, but let's prove that and open a terminal window. Now we can see hard linked files if we use the find command. So just type find and then the location of what you want to look at. And then a space and then a hyphen type, space F, space, hyphen links, space and then +1. So let's run that. And we can see here that we've definitely got hard linking, because vdisk 1 is listed twice and vdisk 2 is listed twice. And this command will only list files that are using hard links. So now let's have a look using the du command, which will tell us exactly how much space the same location is taking up on the disk physically. So just type du and then -h for human readable, and then the same location. And here we can see that the total used space is 7.6 gigs. Now yes, that's slightly different than the 8.10 that we saw, but that's just a different way that these 2 tools are actually reporting the size of what a gigabyte actually is. So we can see here that although when we look in Unraid and we see this is taking up 16.2 gigabytes, that's because it's not aware that the files are actually hard linked, and it's actually taking up significantly less space than reported. Okay, so let's do one more test. You can see here now I've added something extra to the source. I've added another vdisk to the folder 3, and that's 11.5 gigs. So again, I'll run the script off screen and then we'll go across to the destination server. And inside the destination folder here, we've now got 3 backups. And if we look at what the file manager thinks the total size of all these 3 backups are, well, we can see it thinks it's 35.8 gigs. And before we ran the backup, it thought it was 16, and we've only added an 11.5 gig vdisk. So why does it think it's so much? So yes, we have only added approximately 11 gigs. But as far as the file manager is concerned, we've added another 8 gigs on top of that as well, because of the hard link files from our previous backup. So let's look in more details by going back to our terminal window here. And let's run the same commands. So first the find command, and we can see the only hard links is vdisk1 and vdisk2 here. Now it's expected we can't see vdisk3 because it's only been there since the last backup, so it's only referenced once in the backups. If we were to run the script again, then we'd start seeing it here as a hard link. So let's run the du command again and see the true size of what's being taken up. Okay, so let's start at the top here. We've got 5.4 gigs in the first backup in folder 1. That was our vdisk. Now underneath there we see folder 3. If you remember, that was empty, so that's 0. And folder 2 had our 2.2 gig vdisk inside. Underneath that we can see the total size of our first backup, the 7.6 gigs there. Next we see the next backup that we did. That had no changes, so all 3 folders have a total size of 0. Underneath that we see the total size of the parent folder, which is obviously 0 as well. Finally onto our last backup and folder 1 here, no changes, so a size of 0. But underneath folder 3, that's where our 11 gig vdisk is, so we can see that says 11 gigs here. Then underneath that folder 2, again no changes, so 0. And underneath that the parent folder, well obviously that's going to report as 11 gigs. Then finally the last thing at the bottom here, the parent of all of these, the total size of the backup location takes up only 19 gigs. And just to remind us how much space this would have taken up if we hadn't done incremental backups, well, it would have taken up almost 36 gigs. Well, that pretty much brings us to the end of this second part of these videos. And maybe you're wondering, well, should I use ZFS replication or Rsync replication? Well, in my opinion, if you can put it on a Z pool in a dataset, well, always use ZFS replication. Basically, it's more advanced and more efficient than Rsync replication. And to illustrate that point, let's go back to the other server. And this vdisk here, this 11.5 vdisk, well, if we fired up the VM that this belonged to, and say we added just a very small text file, a couple of kilobytes in size, shut the VM down, well, not really much data's changed. And because ZFS works on the block level and can see the underlying blocks in the disk, it would only need to transfer the changed blocks. So it'd be super fast, just having to send a few blocks across to the destination. However, Rsync, it works on a level higher than that. It doesn't work on the block level, it works on a file level. So even though we'd changed just a few kilobytes in the vdisk, for it to make its incremental backup, it's going to consider that vdisk different, and it will have to transfer the whole 11 gigabytes across to the destination, not only taking more time, but also taking up more space. But we don't always have a ZFS destination to replicate to, and so that's when the Rsync replication really comes into its own. Because we're replicating from an actual dataset, we're snapshotting that, so we don't have to shut anything down, and then making a live backup to anywhere we want. Now, some of you guys out there might be saying, hey Space Invader, but what about Btrfs? That does snapshots too. Can we do something similar with that? Well, the answer is yes. Btrfs does do snapshots, and I've been working on a script to auto-convert folders on a Btrfs drive into subvolumes so we can snapshot them and then replicate the data elsewhere. Now, the script's not fully finished, but I hope to have it done within a few weeks. So keep an eye out for that on my GitHub, and keep an eye out for a video about that too. Okay guys, so that brings us to the end of both Part A and Part B on snapshotting and replicating a ZFS dataset. Now, I really hope you find these scripts useful and easy to use. Now, I have been thinking maybe trying to convert them into a plugin, but I haven't really decided yet. Let me know what you think by giving it a thumbs up and a comment below. Now, as always, I want to give a huge thank you to all of my patrons and supporters out there. Without you guys, I really wouldn't be able to do what I do. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart for your support. Anyway guys, it's getting late here, so it's time for me to go. But whatever you're up to for the rest of the day, I hope it's good. And I'll catch you in the next video.